Ethan Cole stood at the altar, seconds away from marrying into Manhattan's elite, when he spotted her in the crowd. Nora, his ex-wife. The woman he'd abandoned when they had nothing. He'd sent that invitation as a trophy, proof he'd won without her. But something was wrong. She wasn't broken. She wasn't alone. And the man beside her made half the room straighten in their seats. Ethan's triumph suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. He didn't know it yet, but his wedding day would become the beginning of his unraveling. Want to see how this story ends? Stay until the final moment, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Ethan Cole held it between his fingers like a winning lottery ticket, cream-colored stock with gold embossing that probably cost more per square inch than his first apartment's monthly rent. His name sprawled across the front in calligraphy so perfect it looked computer-generated, though he knew it wasn't. Lillian had insisted on hand-addressing every invitation, 347 of them. "Did you get to the H's yet?" he called toward the study. Lillian appeared in the doorway of their Tribeca loft, still in her yoga clothes from the morning class she attended religiously. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that probably had its own name in whatever magazine she'd copied it from. She was beautiful in that specific way wealthy women achieved around 30, not from genetics alone, but from access. The right dermatologist, the right trainer, the right everything. "I finished the entire list yesterday," she said, crossing to where he stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Why?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was looking at one invitation in particular, still sitting on his desk. He'd filled out the address himself in his own considerably worse handwriting. Nora Hale. Just the name made something twist in his chest. Not regret exactly. He didn't do regret, but something sharper, more complex, like pressing on a bruise to make sure it still hurt. "No reason," he said. Lillian picked up her green juice from the counter. She was always drinking something green, something that cost $12 and tasted like punishment. "You're thinking about her again?" It wasn't a question. "I'm not." "Ethan." She set down the juice with a soft clink. "You've been different ever since we finalized the guest list. Distracted. You keep checking your phone like you're waiting for something. I'm about to get married. I'm allowed to be distracted." "To me, yes. To your ex-wife, no." He turned to face her fully. Lillian was good at this, at cutting through his bullshit with surgical precision. It was one of the things that had attracted him to her initially. She was nothing like Nora, who'd spent their entire marriage trying to smooth over his rough edges, to make peace instead of naming problems. "I invited her to make a point," Ethan said. "That's all." "What point?" "That I moved on. That I'm fine. Better than fine." Lillian studied him with those cool blue eyes. "You don't send invitations to prove you've moved on, Ethan. You send them to prove something else entirely." She was right, of course, but he wasn't ready to admit what that something else was. The truth was uglier than he wanted to acknowledge. He'd invited Nora because he needed her to see this. The penthouse. The wedding. Lillian, with her old money and her effortless connections. He needed Nora to walk into that reception hall and understand viscerally that leaving her had been the right choice, that she'd been the weight dragging him down, and cutting her loose had let him soar. He needed her to hurt. Just a little. Just enough. "She probably won't even come," Ethan said, turning back to the window. Below, the city sprawled out in all directions, a kingdom he'd conquered through sheer force of will. "It's been 4 years. She's moved on too." "Has she?" "How would I know?" "You could look her up." "I don't care enough to look her up." Lillian made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Right." She left him there, and Ethan listened to her footsteps fade toward the bedroom. He should follow her. They had a final tasting at the caterer's in 2 hours, and she'd be annoyed if he was late. Lillian didn't tolerate lateness. She had a spreadsheet for the wedding that would make a military general weep with envy. But instead, he pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the search bar for a full minute before he typed, "Nora Hale." The results loaded slowly, or maybe it just felt slow because his heart was doing something stupid in his chest. There were a few hits, a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in years, listing her as a freelance consultant, a mention in some charity newsletter from 18 months ago, a Facebook profile set to private, Nothing interesting, nothing that told him anything real. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt cheated. 4 years ago, when he'd left, Nora had been working 2 jobs to keep them afloat while he built CodeStream from the ground up. She'd been a legal assistant during the day and a bartender 3 nights a week. She'd come home smelling like other people's liquor and bad decisions, and she'd never complained. Not once. She should have complained. That was the thing that had bothered him most in the end. Her relentless optimism. Her belief that if they just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, they'd make it. Together. He'd stopped believing in together somewhere around month 18 when he'd maxed out their 3rd credit card and she'd smiled at him across their kitchen table, really just a door they'd laid across 2 filing cabinets, and said, "It's okay, we'll figure it out." We always do, except they hadn't figured it out. He had. He'd landed the meeting with Marcus Trent, the venture capitalist who'd ended up giving him his first real funding, $2 million, enough to actually build something. And Marcus had taken one look at Ethan's life, the cramped apartment, the wife with 2 jobs and tired eyes, the desperation clinging to everything, and said something Ethan had never forgotten. "You're going to have to make choices, kid. Hard ones. You can build an empire or you can build a life. Pick one." Ethan had picked. 3 months after the funding came through, he'd sat Nora down in their apartment, by then a slightly better apartment, though still nothing special, and told her he wanted a divorce. He could still see her face, the way it had emptied out, like someone had pulled a plug and drained everything that made her her. "Why?" she'd asked. He'd practiced the speech. He'd known all the logical reasons, all the careful explanations about growing apart and wanting different things. But when the moment came, what he'd actually said was, "Because I need to focus." On what? On building something that matters. "I thought I mattered." She'd said it quietly, not angry, just factual, like she was testing the statement to see if it was still true. "You do," he'd lied. "But this is different. This is my chance, Nora, and I can't do it while trying to hold everything together here too. I can't be who I need to be and still be married." What he hadn't said, "I can't be who I need to be married to you." To someone who'd seen him at his lowest, who remembered when he'd sold his laptop for grocery money, who knew exactly how many nights he'd spent crying in their bathroom, terrified he'd fail. He needed a clean slate, a fresh start with someone who'd only ever known him as successful. The divorce had been quick. Nora hadn't fought him on anything. She'd signed the papers with steady hands and moved out within a week, taking almost nothing with her except her clothes and a few books. She'd left the furniture, the kitchen supplies, even the coffee maker he'd bought her for their first anniversary. He'd sold it all when he moved to the loft. Now, standing in that loft with its designer everything and its view that cost more per month than most people made in a year, Ethan tried to remember the last time he'd felt satisfied. Really satisfied, bone deep, the way he'd expected to feel once he made it. The feeling never came. CodeStream was worth $80 million. He had a staff of 47 people. Last month, Tech Insider had run a profile on him titled "The Kid Who Coded His Way to the Top." The article hadn't mentioned Nora. He'd made sure of it. His phone buzzed. Lillian. Leaving in 15. "Don't make us late." He pocketed the phone and took one last look at the invitation he had addressed to Nora. It sat on his desk like an accusation. He wondered if she'd open it. He wondered if she'd cry. He wondered if some small, petty part of her would want to come just to see what she'd lost. He hoped so. Across the city, in a different penthouse with a different view, Nora Hale stood in her kitchen and stared at the same cream-colored envelope. She'd known what it was the moment she saw it in the mail. Who else sent physical invitations anymore? Only people with something to prove. "You going to open it, or are you planning to set it on fire?" Victor Kane walked into the kitchen, still in his running clothes. He was 52, 15 years older than Nora, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of calm that came from having enough money that very few things qualified as actual problems. "Haven't decided yet," Nora said. Victor poured himself water from the filtered tap. Another difference between her old life and this one, she thought. Water that came from a special filter that removed impurities she couldn't pronounce. "Who's it from?" "My ex-husband." Victor's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "The tech guy." "Ethan, yeah. Didn't know you two kept in touch." "We don't." "So this is a wedding invitation." Victor set down his glass with deliberate care. He invited his ex-wife to his wedding. Apparently. That's either very mature or very fucked up. I'm going with option 2. Victor moved closer, and Nora felt herself relax slightly. This was what she'd needed after Ethan, someone solid, someone who didn't need her to be smaller so he could feel bigger. Victor had his own empire. He'd built Kane Investments from the ground up over 25 years, turning a small inheritance into a portfolio worth north of $300 million. When they'd met 2 years ago at a charity gala, Nora had been working as a consultant for nonprofits, helping them structure their fundraising. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. She'd built it from nothing after the divorce, when Ethan's lawyer had made sure she got exactly half of nothing. Victor had approached her at the bar and asked what she thought of the foundation hosting the event. She'd been honest, told him their overhead was too high, and their impact metrics were garbage. He'd laughed and hired her on the spot. 6 months later, they were dating. A year after that, married. It wasn't a fairy tale. Nora didn't believe in those anymore. But it was partnership, real partnership. Victor didn't need her to sacrifice so he could shine. He wanted her to shine too. You should go, Victor said now. Nora looked up sharply. What? To the wedding. You should go. Why would I do that? Because you're curious. Because it bothers you that he invited you. Because you want to see what kind of woman he replaced you with. Victor's smile was slight. And because you'll regret it if you don't. I won't regret it. I'll regret going. Maybe. But at least it'll be an active regret. The kind you chose. Not the passive kind that eats at you. Nora turned the invitation over in her hands. The return address was for some venue in Brooklyn she'd never heard of. Probably trendy. Probably expensive. Probably everything Ethan had dreamed about when they were eating ramen for the 4th night in a row. He wants me to see him win, she said quietly. So let him think that's what you're doing, and then show him what winning actually looks like. She met Victor's eyes. He wasn't smiling anymore. You've mentioned the Kane portfolio includes some tech investments, Nora said slowly. We're diversified. How diversified? Nora. Just curious. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he walked to his study and returned with his tablet. A few taps, and he turned the screen toward her. CodeStream Inc. Primary investors, Kane Investments, 34%. Trent Capital, 28%. Ashford Holdings, 18%. Nora felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. You invested in Ethan's company. The fund did, yes, 2 years ago. Series B round. I wasn't directly involved, but I review all major tech investments. He paused. I knew it was your ex-husband's company. And you didn't tell me. Would you have wanted to know? She didn't answer. She was staring at the screen, at the numbers that represented Ethan's dream made real. 34%. Kane Investments owned more of CodeStream than anyone except Ethan himself, which meant, technically, she had power here. She and Victor had a prenup, but they'd also established a joint investment vehicle 6 months into their marriage. Equal partners. Any major decisions required both signatures, including anything related to their largest holdings. You're thinking something, Victor said. I'm thinking he has no idea. No idea that his primary investor is married to his ex-wife. No, I'm quite sure he doesn't. That's not in any of the public filings. Our marriage isn't public information, and you kept your maiden name professionally. Nora set down the invitation. Her hands were steadier than she expected. If I went to this wedding, you'd be there as my wife, Mrs. Kane, not as Nora Hale, the ex-wife he left behind. He wouldn't know until you wanted him to know. They looked at each other. Victor's expression was neutral, but Nora knew him well enough to read the slight tension around his eyes. He was giving her a choice, really giving it to her, not just performing the gesture. This could get complicated, she said. Life's complicated. Might as well be interesting too. Nora picked up the invitation again. Inside was a response card with 2 options, accepts with pleasure or declines with regret. She checked the first box. Then she pulled out her phone and texted her assistant. I need a dress, something that makes a statement. Victor raised an eyebrow. What kind of statement? The kind that says I'm not who he remembers. And who is he going to remember? Nora thought about that for a moment. She thought about the version of herself who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Who'd believed in Ethan's dream more than her own? Who'd signed those divorce papers in a coffee shop because they couldn't afford a real lawyer and cried in the bathroom afterward while Ethan waited outside, checking his phone? Someone small, she said finally. Someone grateful just to be in the room. And who are you now? She met Victor's eyes. Someone who owns the room. The response cards started coming back 3 weeks before the wedding. Ethan shouldn't have been tracking them. He had people for that. Lillian's wedding planner, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Patricia, who spoke in military time and had never smiled in Ethan's presence. But he couldn't help himself. He checked the list every few days, scanning for one name in particular. Nora Hale. No response. 2 weeks before the wedding, no response. 1 week before, no response. She's not coming, Lillian said, finding him in his office late on a Thursday night, staring at the guest list spreadsheet. You need to let this go. I have let it go. You're literally looking at a spreadsheet of RSVPs at 11 p.m. I was checking numbers, making sure we have an accurate count for the caterer. We have a wedding planner for that. We're paying her $8,000 for that exact purpose. Ethan closed his laptop. Lillian was right. She was usually right, which was both comforting and exhausting. Come to bed, she said softer now. You look tired. He was tired. CodeStream was in the middle of a product launch, and the stress of it was making his jaw ache from grinding his teeth at night. The wedding planning had somehow become a second full-time job, despite Lillian doing most of the actual work. And somewhere under all of it was this low-grade anxiety he couldn't name, like waiting for test results he didn't remember taking. In bed, Lillian curled against him, her head on his chest. This should have felt perfect. She should have been perfect. And she was, objectively. Beautiful, smart, connected. She'd introduced him to 3 major investors in the past year alone. Her father sat on the board of 2 Fortune 500 companies. Marrying her was the smartest thing he'd ever done. So why did it feel like he was trying to convince himself? I love you, he said into the darkness. Lillian made a sleepy sound. I know. Not I love you too. Just, I know. He stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the fact that Nora used to say it back every single time, like it was important, like the words mattered more than the understanding. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. An email. He shouldn't check it. It was nearly midnight. Whatever it was could wait until morning. He checked it anyway. CodeStream Investor Update. Q. 3/2024. Standard quarterly report from their CFO. He almost deleted it without opening, but something made him scroll through. Revenue numbers, user growth, burn rate, all good news. Then at the bottom, note, Kane Investments has requested a board observer seat in conjunction with their Series B holdings. Recommend approval. Ethan frowned. Kane Investments was their largest outside investor, so the request wasn't unusual. But the timing felt odd. They'd been perfectly hands-off for 2 years. Why the sudden interest? He made a mental note to ask Marcus about it in the morning. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the wedding RSVP system. New response received. Nora Hale. His heart did something stupid and arrhythmic. He opened the notification with hands that had gone cold. Nora Hale. Accepts with pleasure. And below that, in the +1 field, Victor Kane. Ethan read the name 3 times before his brain processed it. Victor Kane. As in Kane Investments. As in his largest fucking investor. Nora was coming to his wedding. With Victor Kane. Who was old enough to be her father. Who was worth more than Ethan would probably make in his entire lifetime. He sat up so abruptly that Lillian stirred. What's wrong? Nothing. Email. I need to. I'll be back. He didn't wait for her response. He was already out of bed, laptop in hand, heading for his office. He pulled up every search result he could find for Victor Kane. Forbes profile. Wall Street Journal interview. Philanthropic commitments. Investment thesis. Everything public-facing, nothing personal. Then he tried Victor Kane wife. The results were sparse. Victor was notoriously private. But there, buried in a society page from 6 months ago, was a photo from some gala. Victor Kane in a tuxedo, silver-haired and distinguished, smiling at the camera. And beside him, in a dress that probably cost more than Ethan's first car, was Nora. The caption, Investor Victor Kane and wife Nora at the Metropolitan Museum's annual benefit. Wife. Nora had married Victor Kane. Ethan's brain stuttered over the information, trying to reconcile the woman he'd left, working 2 jobs, wearing secondhand clothes, drinking cheap wine, with the woman in this photo who looked like she'd been born in that dress. Born to that life. He clicked back to the RSVP. Accepts with pleasure. The words took on a different meaning now. Not a defeated ex-wife showing up to torture herself, but a woman attending with her investor husband. A woman who had every right to be there. A woman who'd married a man who owned a third of Ethan's company. His phone rang. Marcus Trent. Did you see the quarterly report? Marcus asked without preamble. The Kane board observer request? Yeah. Do we know why they're suddenly interested? Not yet, but we should approve it. They've been good partners so far. Who handles their tech portfolio? Kane himself, mostly. He's pretty hands-on with the major holdings. Why? Ethan hesitated. Then, did you know he's married? I think so. Why does that matter? His wife is my ex-wife. Silence on the other end of the line. Say that again, Marcus said slowly. Nora, my ex-wife. She's married to Victor Kane. When did this happen? I don't know, sometime in the last couple years. And you didn't know. How would I know? I don't keep tabs on my ex-wife. Apparently you should have. Marcus let out a low whistle. This is complicated. You think? Does he know about you two? I have no idea. Probably not. Why would she tell him? Why wouldn't she? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Look, Marcus said, this doesn't change anything operationally. Kane Investments has been a great partner, professional, hands-off. Whatever personal history exists, we keep it separate. Right. But Ethan, maybe don't antagonize the guy who owns 34% of your company. I'm not planning to antagonize anyone. Good. Because if this gets messy, it could affect the whole cap table. Other investors get nervous when there's drama, and we're supposed to close Series C in 6 months. After Marcus hung up, Ethan sat in his office and stared at the photo of Nora. She looked different. Not just the dress and the setting, something in her face. She looked certain, like she knew exactly where she belonged and didn't need anyone's permission to be there. He remembered the last time he'd seen her, in that coffee shop, signing the divorce papers. She'd worn jeans and a sweater with a small hole in the sleeve. Her hair had been pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd looked tired and small and defeated. This woman in the photo looked like she could buy and sell the entire coffee shop without checking her bank balance. Lillian appeared in the doorway. It's 2 a.m. I know. Come back to bed. In a minute. She crossed the room and looked at his screen. He didn't close the window fast enough. That's her? Lillian asked. Yeah. She's pretty. That's not really the point. Isn't it? Lillian tilted her head. She's coming to the wedding, with a date who's significantly richer than you, and you're sitting here at 2 a.m. staring at her picture. It's not like that. Then what's it like, Ethan? Explain it to me. He couldn't, because the truth was something he barely understood himself. He'd invited Nora to prove he'd won, that leaving her had been the right choice, that he'd moved up and moved on. But Nora had moved up too. Further than he had, apparently. And now she was coming to his wedding not as the woman he'd left behind, but as the wife of his most important investor. The power dynamic had shifted, and he hadn't even noticed until it was too late. I wanted her to see that I made it, he said finally. And now? Now she's going to show me that she did too. Lillian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Maybe you should have left well enough alone. She went back to bed. Ethan stayed in his office until dawn, trying to figure out exactly when he'd lost control of his own revenge. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt like mockery. Clear skies, 72 degrees, a light breeze that wouldn't mess up anyone's hair. Ethan stood in the groom's suite at the Brooklyn venue, some converted warehouse that Lillian had fallen in love with because it had character, and tried to knot his tie for the 3rd time. His hands wouldn't cooperate. Here, Marcus appeared beside him, brushing his hands away. You're making it worse. Ethan let him take over. Marcus had been his best man by default. They'd known each other the longest in this new version of Ethan's life, the post-divorce version, the successful version. "You good?" Marcus asked, focusing on the tie. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you've been weird for 3 weeks, ever since you found out about Nora." "I'm not weird. I'm focused." "You're something." Marcus finished with the tie and stepped back. "Look, whatever you're planning, I'm not planning anything." "Don't do it. Today's about you and Lillian, not about your ex-wife and her rich husband." "I know that." "Do you?" "Because you've checked your phone 6 times in the last 10 minutes. Ethan pocketed his phone. The caterer had questions. "The caterer has Patricia, who, by the way, would murder you if she knew you were micromanaging on your wedding day." There was a knock, and one of the groomsmen stuck his head in. "They're starting to seat people." Ethan's stomach did something unpleasant. "Already?" "It's 2:30. Ceremony's at 3. "Right, of course. Everything was on schedule because Lillian's life ran on schedules." Marcus gripped his shoulder. "You ready?" No, Ethan thought, but he said, "Yeah." The venue was filling up fast when he took his position at the altar. 347 invitations sent. At least 280 confirmed. The space looked like something out of a magazine. Exposed brick, hanging lights, flowers everywhere. White roses. Lillian's favorite, though Ethan suspected she'd chosen them more for how they photographed than because she actually cared about flowers. He scanned the crowd, trying not to be obvious about it. Investors in the front rows. Lillian's family taking up an entire section on the bride's side. His own side was sparser. He didn't have much family to speak of, and most of his old friends had fallen away during the years he'd spent building CodeStream. The people sitting on his side were mostly employees and business contacts, people who knew the successful version of him. Then he saw her. Nora was sitting 8 rows back on the aisle. She wore a dress the color of deep emerald, simple in cut but clearly expensive. Her dark hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She looked calm, unaffected, like she attended her ex-husband's weddings every weekend. The man beside her had to be Victor Kane. Silver hair, good suit, the kind of posture that came from decades of people listening when you spoke. He had his hand resting lightly on the back of Nora's chair, not possessive, just present. Nora wasn't looking at Ethan. She was looking at the flowers, at the architecture, at everything except him. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The music started. The wedding party began their procession. Lillian's bridesmaids floated down the aisle in their pale pink dresses, all identical smiles and practiced steps. Then the music shifted and everyone stood. Lillian appeared at the back of the space. She looked perfect. Of course she did. The dress had cost $30,000 and required 3 fittings. Her hair was arranged in some complicated updo that had taken her stylist 4 hours. Her makeup was flawless. She was everything a bride should be. Ethan tried to feel something overwhelming, something that justified all of this. Instead, he felt like he was watching himself from a distance, playing a role in a production he'd somehow agreed to star in. Lillian reached the altar, and her father, a hedge fund manager whose name opened doors Ethan couldn't even see, placed her hand in Ethan's. The old man's grip was firm. Warning. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began. Ethan's attention drifted. He couldn't help it. His eyes found Nora again. She was watching now. Not him, exactly. The ceremony. But there was something in her expression he couldn't read. Not sadness, not anger. Something more complex, like she was working out a math problem in her head. Victor leaned over and whispered something. Nora's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like acknowledgement. They looked comfortable together. Easy. The way people looked when they'd stopped trying to impress each other and settled into something real. Ethan realized the officiant had asked him a question. "Sorry?" Polite laughter from the crowd. The officiant smiled patiently. "Do you, Ethan Cole, take Lillian Ashcroft to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." The words came out automatically. Muscle memory. He'd said them before, to a different woman in a different life. In a courthouse that smelled like floor cleaner, wearing a suit he'd borrowed from a friend. Nora in a white dress from a consignment shop, holding grocery store flowers. She'd cried during those vows. "Happy tears," she'd said later. Lillian wasn't crying. Lillian didn't do public displays of emotion. You may kiss the bride. Ethan kissed his wife. The crowd applauded, music swelled. It was all very proper and orchestrated and exactly what it should be. They walked back down the aisle together, and Ethan's eyes found Nora one more time. She was clapping along with everyone else. Polite, appropriate. Their eyes met for half a second. Then she looked away first. The reception was in the same space, transformed during the cocktail hour. Round tables with white linens. More flowers. A band setting up in the corner. Open bar already 3 deep with guests. Ethan and Lillian did their rounds, greeting everyone, accepting congratulations. His face hurt from smiling. Lillian's hand in his was cool and dry, her grip firm whenever someone important approached. "Ethan Cole!" A booming voice. Harrison Ashcroft, Lillian's father, descended on them with 2 other men in expensive suits. "Wanted to introduce you to Richard Chen. Richard, this is my new son-in-law, the tech wonderkind I've been telling you about." Richard Chen extended his hand. "Congratulations. Harrison says you're doing interesting work in the B2B space." "We try," Ethan said, slipping into the pitch automatically. CodeStream focuses on enterprise workflow automation. We've seen 300% year-over-year growth. "Impressive. We should talk. I'm always looking for smart investments." This was the game. This was what the wedding was really about. Not love or commitment, but networking. Access. Lillian had brought him into a world where weddings were business development opportunities, where every conversation was a potential deal. He should be grateful. He was grateful. He just wished gratitude felt different than this hollow ache in his chest. "Excuse me." Lillian touched his arm. "I need to steal my husband for a moment." She led him away from the investors toward the edge of the room. Her smile was fixed in place, but her voice was low. "She's here." "I know. With Victor Kane." "I know that too." "Did you know they were married?" "Not until she RSVP'd." Lillian studied him. "This is going to be a problem, isn't it?" "Why would it be a problem?" "Because you're looking at her like—" She stopped, shook her head. "Never mind. Just try to focus. This is our day." "I am focused." But he wasn't. He was tracking Nora's movement through the room the way you'd track a wildfire. She and Victor had found their table, were talking to the other guests seated there. She was laughing at something, her hand on Victor's arm. Comfortable, easy, nothing like the tense, exhausted woman he'd divorced. Dinner was served, speeches were made. Marcus told a story about the first time he'd met Ethan, in a coffee shop, both of them waiting for the same investor meeting, both convinced the other was the competition. Lillian's sister gave a speech about true love that sounded like it had been written by a greeting card company. Through it all, Ethan picked at his food and drank more wine than he should have. When the dancing started, he did his duty. First dance with Lillian, some song she'd chosen that he barely recognized. Then the father-daughter dance, the mother-son dance, all the choreographed moments that made for good photographs. Finally, he had a moment to breathe. He found himself at the bar, ordering a whiskey. "Make it 2. Ethan turned. Victor Kane stood beside him, hands in his pockets, expression neutral. Up close, he looked older than his pictures. 50-something. Distinguished in that way that came from money and confidence. He had the kind of face that gave nothing away. "Victor Kane," the man said, extending his hand. Ethan shook it. "Ethan Cole, though I guess you knew that." "Hard to miss the groom." Victor accepted his whiskey from the bartender. "Congratulations. Beautiful ceremony." "Thank you." They stood there in awkward silence. Ethan tried to figure out what the protocol was for talking to your ex-wife's new husband, current husband, whatever. "I should mention," Victor said, "Kane Investments holds a significant position in CodeStream." "I'm aware." "Wanted to address that directly. Make sure there's no weirdness." "Why would there be weirdness?" Victor's smile was slight. "Because I'm married to your ex-wife and I own a third of your company. That's at least 2 different kinds of awkward." Ethan took a drink. The whiskey burned. "Business is business. Personal is personal." "That's very mature of you." "I'm a very mature person. Are you?" Victor's tone hadn't changed, but something in it made Ethan's shoulders tense. "Because sending a wedding invitation to your ex-wife feels like something a mature person might avoid. I invited a lot of people." But you specifically invited her. Nora mentioned it. Of course she had. Ethan tried to keep his expression neutral. We ended on good terms. I thought she'd want to know I was doing well. Doing well. Victor repeated the phrase like he was tasting it. That's one way to describe it. How would you describe it? I'd describe it as a man who wanted to prove something, though I'm not entirely sure what. Ethan felt heat creeping up his neck. With all due respect, you don't need to respect me. We're not friends. We're just two people who happen to marry the same woman at different points in her life. Victor finished his whiskey. But since we're here, let me be clear about something. Nora didn't want to come today. She thought it was a bad idea. I'm the one who convinced her. Why? Because I thought she needed to see you, to put that part of her life to rest. Victor set down his glass. Turns out, she was already over it. I'm the one who needed convincing. I don't understand. You left her with nothing, did you know that? After the divorce, she had $700 and a suitcase. She was living in a sublet the size of a closet, working 3 jobs to pay off the debt you two had accumulated. Ethan's jaw tightened. The divorce was mutual. The divorce was you walking away because she reminded you where you came from. There's nothing mutual about that. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Victor leaned against the bar. His voice remained calm, almost conversational. Nora told me everything. About the jobs she worked to support you, the sacrifices she made, how you repaid her by deciding she wasn't good enough for the life you wanted. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? Ethan couldn't answer, because Victor was right, and they both knew it. The interesting thing, Victor continued, is that Nora didn't want me to tell you any of this. She said it didn't matter, that you were part of her past and she'd moved on. He paused. But I think it does matter. I think you should know what it cost her to build herself back up after you tore her down. I didn't tear her down. You left her with nothing and told her it was her fault for holding you back. What would you call that? Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but the words stuck in his throat. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Victor said. I'm here because my wife asked me to come, and because I wanted to meet the man who was stupid enough to walk away from her. He straightened. Enjoy your reception, Ethan. Enjoy your beautiful bride and your successful company. Just remember that the success you're so proud of, Nora helped build the foundation. You just knocked down the house to make room for something bigger. He walked away before Ethan could respond. Ethan stood at the bar, hands shaking, anger and shame twisting in his gut. Around him, the reception continued. Music played, people danced. No one had noticed the conversation. No one knew that Ethan's carefully constructed triumph had just been dismantled in under 5 minutes. He ordered another whiskey. By the time he made his way back to the dance floor, Lillian was talking to her father's business associates. She caught his eye and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew something was wrong. She always knew. Ethan forced himself to circulate, to smile, to accept congratulations, to pretend everything was exactly as it should be. But his eyes kept finding Nora. She was dancing with Victor now, slow, easy, his hand on her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. They looked like they'd been doing this for years, like they fit. The way Ethan and Nora never had. Even back when things were good, there'd been a friction, a sense that they were both trying too hard, forcing something that should have been natural. He'd blamed her for that, told himself she was too needy, too dependent, too much of everything he was trying to escape. But watching her now, he realized the friction hadn't been about her at all. It had been about him, about his own inadequacy, his fear that he'd never be more than where he came from. And Nora had been there, a living reminder of every night he'd failed, every dream that had felt impossible. So he'd left her behind like she was part of the poverty he was trying to escape. The song ended. Victor and Nora separated, and Nora excused herself, probably heading to the bathroom. Ethan found himself following before he could think better of it. The hallway outside the reception space was empty, quiet. Nora was checking her phone, leaning against the brick wall. Nora. She looked up. For a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or resignation. Then it smoothed into polite neutrality. Ethan, congratulations. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me. She slipped her phone into her clutch. Lillian seems lovely. She is. And the venue is beautiful, very Instagram-worthy. There was something sharp in the way she said it, Not quite mockery, but close. I wanted to talk to you, Ethan said. About what? About, I don't know, about everything. About us. There is no us. There hasn't been for 4 years. I know, but he ran a hand through his hair. Victor said some things. Victor says a lot of things. He's opinionated. He said I left you with nothing. Nora's expression didn't change. He shouldn't have told you that. Is it true? Does it matter? Yes. No, I don't. Ethan felt like he was drowning. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't ask. The words hit like a punch. Simple, factual, true. I thought you'd be fine, he said, knowing how weak it sounded. I was fine. Eventually, Nora crossed her arms. Look, Ethan, I appreciate the concern, but it's 4 years too late. I'm not that person anymore. I don't need your guilt or your apologies. Then what do you need? Nothing. From you? Nothing. It shouldn't have hurt. He'd ended things. He'd made his choice. But hearing her say it, hearing the finality in her voice, felt like losing something he hadn't realized he still had. You married Victor Kane, he said. I did. He's a lot older than you. He's 52. I'm 37. We're both adults. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Ethan didn't have an answer, or rather he did, but it was ugly and jealous and beneath him. He owns 1/3 of my company, he said instead. I know. Did you know when you married him? Nora's eyes narrowed. Are you asking if I married him to get close to your company? Because if you are, you're even more self-centered than I remember. Victor and I met at a charity event. He hired me as a consultant. We worked together for 6 months before anything personal developed. I had no idea he'd invested in CodeStream until after we were engaged. She pushed off the wall. And frankly, it wouldn't have mattered if I had known. Your company is a blip on his portfolio. You're not that important. The words were meant to sting, and they did. I'm going back inside, Nora said. Enjoy your wedding, Ethan. Enjoy your perfect life with your perfect wife. Just do me a favor and stop pretending you care what happened to me after you left. It's insulting to both of us. She walked past him, her shoulder brushing his. He caught the scent of her perfume, something expensive he didn't recognize. Nothing like the drugstore body spray she used to wear. Everything about her was different, or maybe he'd never actually known her at all. Ethan stood in the hallway for a long time, trying to figure out when everything had gotten so far away from what he'd planned. When he finally returned to the reception, Lillian was looking for him. Where have you been? Just needed some air. You've been gone for 20 minutes. People are asking about the cake cutting. Right, sorry. They cut the cake. They fed each other bites while people took photos. They did the bouquet toss and the garter removal and all the other traditions that felt increasingly hollow with each passing moment. Through it all, Ethan watched Nora and Victor from the corner of his eye. They left early, before the reception ended. Nora said goodbye to a few people near their table, collected her wrap, and then they were gone. Just like that. No dramatic exit. No final confrontation. They simply left, like the wedding was just another event on their calendar. Like Ethan was just another person they used to know. By the time the reception finally ended, midnight, according to the timeline Patricia had probably carved in stone somewhere, Ethan was exhausted and drunk and angry at himself for reasons he couldn't articulate. Lillian was quiet in the car back to their hotel. They were flying to the Maldives in the morning for their honeymoon. 2 weeks at a resort that cost more per night than Ethan's first apartment cost per month. That was nice, Lillian said finally. Yeah. Your ex-wife is very elegant. Ethan looked at her sharply. What? Nora. She's elegant, poised. Not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more defeated, I guess. Someone who looked like you'd broken her heart. Lillian studied her nails. Instead, she looked like she'd forgotten you existed. She hasn't forgotten. Are you sure? Because from where I was standing, she looked completely indifferent, and her husband looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Lillian turned to face him. That must have been hard for you. What must have been hard? Realizing you made a mistake. Ethan's throat tightened. I didn't make a mistake. I married you. Yes, you did. And we're going to have a lovely life together. The right connections, the right circles, the right everything. Her voice was flat. But you'll always wonder, won't you? You'll always look at her and wonder what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to stay. Lillian, don't. She held up a hand. Don't lie to me. Not tonight. I've spent 6 months planning this wedding, and I deserve at least that much honesty. The car pulled up to the hotel. The driver opened Lillian's door and she stepped out, her dress trailing behind her like a ghost. Ethan sat in the car for a moment, watching his bride walk away. Then he followed her inside, because that's what husbands did. They went to their suite. They went through the motions. They didn't talk about Nora or Victor or the cracks that were already forming in their foundation. Instead, they packed for their honeymoon and pretended everything was exactly as it should be. And Ethan tried very hard not to think about the look on Nora's face when she'd told him he wasn't important anymore. Tried and failed. The Maldives was exactly as advertised. White sand beaches, water so blue it looked photoshopped, a villa that jutted out over the ocean like something from a travel magazine. Ethan and Lillian had their own private pool, a butler who appeared whenever they needed anything, and enough space that they could go hours without seeing each other. Which was good, because they weren't talking much. On the third day, Ethan sat on their private deck, laptop balanced on his knees, trying to focus on the Series C pitch deck Marcus had sent over. They were meeting with potential investors in 6 weeks, and the numbers needed to be perfect. Growth projections, user acquisition costs, runway calculations. All the metrics that would convince rich people to give him more money to get richer. His phone rang. Marcus. "You're supposed to be on your honeymoon," Marcus said without preamble. "I'm on my honeymoon." "Then why are you answering work calls?" "Because you called me." "Fair point." Ethan heard papers shuffling in the background. "We got the Kane Investments meeting request. They want to discuss the board observer seat." Ethan's stomach tightened. "When?" "Next week. After you're back. Victor Kane himself is coming." "Great. You don't sound thrilled." "Why would I be thrilled about meeting with my ex-wife's husband?" "Because he owns a third of your company and could help us close the Series C?" Marcus paused. "Also, I've been thinking about the optics here." "What optics?" "Kane showing up right after your wedding, right after you invited his wife. It feels intentional." "You think he's making a move?" "I think he's making a point. Question is, what point?" Ethan didn't have an answer. He'd been asking himself the same thing since the reception, running through the conversation with Victor over and over, trying to decode the subtext. "Just be prepared," Marcus said, "and maybe don't antagonize the man who could tank our valuation with one phone call." After Marcus hung up, Ethan sat staring at the ocean, watching the waves roll in with mechanical precision. Everything here was perfect. Temperature controlled, experience optimized, designed for maximum relaxation. He felt like he was suffocating. Lillian emerged from inside, wearing a white bikini and oversized sunglasses. She'd been getting spa treatments all morning, something involving hot stones and essential oils that cost more than most people's car payments. "Still working?" she asked, settling into the lounge chair beside him. "Just finishing up." "You've been finishing up for 3 days. It's important." "So is your honeymoon." She didn't look at him, just adjusted her sunglasses and opened a book. "But I guess I should be used to coming second by now." Ethan closed his laptop. "That's not fair, isn't it? You've checked your email 400 times. You've taken 8 conference calls. You spent yesterday afternoon redoing financial projections instead of going snorkeling with me. We're about to close a major funding round. I know, you've mentioned it." Lillian turned a page without reading it. "You've mentioned it approximately 60 times since we got here. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say that you're here. Actually here. Not physically present while mentally going through cap tables and investor meetings." She finally looked at him. "I want you to say that marrying me wasn't just another business decision." The words hung between them like smoke. "Of course it wasn't," Ethan said. "Then why does it feel like one?" He didn't answer. Because the truth was complicated and ugly, and this wasn't the time or place for it. Lillian went back to her book. Ethan went back to his laptop. They sat in parallel silence, 2 people who'd promised their lives to each other and couldn't figure out how to share a conversation. That night, they had dinner at the resort's main restaurant. Other honeymooning couples surrounded them, holding hands across tables, feeding each other bites of overpriced seafood, laughing at private jokes. Ethan and Lillian ate in near silence, making small talk about the food, the service, anything except what was actually happening between them. "I've been thinking," Lillian said over dessert. "About what?" "About moving up the timeline on the brownstone." They'd been planning to buy a place in Brooklyn Heights, something historic, something impressive, the kind of home that said they'd arrived. "I thought we were waiting until after the Series C closed," Ethan said. "We were, but I think we should do it now, start looking as soon as we get back." "Why the rush?" Lillian set down her fork with deliberate care. "Because I'd like to feel like we're building something together. A home. A life. Something that isn't just your company and my connections. We are building something." "Are we?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're building CodeStream, and I'm just here. Accessory wife, good for networking, good for appearances, not much else." "That's not true." "Then what am I, Ethan? What am I to you besides convenient?" He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words felt hollow before he even formed them. "I love you," he said instead. "Do you? Or do you love what I represent?" "What's the difference?" Lillian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That might be the saddest thing you've ever said to me." She excused herself, claiming a headache. Ethan sat alone at the table, finishing his wine and watching other couples be happy. When he finally returned to their villa, Lillian was already asleep, or pretending to be. He couldn't tell anymore. The remaining days passed in a haze of forced activities and careful distance. They did the things honeymoon couples were supposed to do: snorkeling, sunset cruises, couples massages. They took photos for Instagram, smiling with their arms around each other, selling the fantasy to people who would never know it was empty. By the time they boarded the plane home, Ethan felt more exhausted than when they'd left. The Kane Investments meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Ethan spent the entire morning rehearsing talking points with Marcus, going over the company's performance metrics, preparing for every possible question. "You're overthinking this," Marcus said, watching Ethan pace the conference room. "It's a standard board observer discussion. They want updates, insight into decision-making. That's it." "Then why is Victor coming himself? He hasn't been to a single meeting in 2 years." "Maybe he wants to be more involved. Maybe his wife suggested it." Ethan shot him a look. "I'm just saying," Marcus continued, "you need to separate your personal feelings from the business reality. Victor Kane is a professional. Whatever happened at your wedding, he's not going to let it affect his investment decisions." "You didn't hear what he said to me." "What did he say?" Ethan had never told Marcus about the conversation at the bar. About Victor's casual dissection of Ethan's character, his relationship with Nora, his entire foundation as a human being. "Nothing important," Ethan lied. At 2:00, the receptionist called. "Mr. Kane is here." Ethan's palms were sweating. He wiped them on his pants and tried to look composed as Victor walked into the conference room. The older man looked exactly as he had at the wedding. Expensive suit, silver hair, that infuriating calm that came from having enough money that very little could touch you. He shook Marcus's hand first, then Ethan's. "Gentlemen, thank you for making time." "Of course," Marcus said, gesturing to the chairs. "We're always happy to meet with our investors." They settled around the table. Ethan's assistant brought water. Victor declined coffee. Everything was painfully polite. "I'll get right to it," Victor said, opening his tablet. "Kane Investments has been reviewing our tech portfolio, and CodeStream is one of our stronger performers. We're impressed with the growth trajectory." "Thank you," Ethan said carefully. "However, we have some concerns about the upcoming Series C." Marcus leaned forward. "What kind of concerns?" "Valuation concerns. You're going into the market asking for a $400 million valuation. That's ambitious." "It's justified by our metrics," Ethan said. "We've tripled revenue year over year. Our customer retention rate is 92%. We're positioned to—" "I've seen the numbers," Victor interrupted gently. "They're good, but they don't support a $400 million valuation in the current market, especially not with your burn rate." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "Our burn rate is standard for a company at our stage." "Standard for companies that fail? Yes." The words landed like a slap. Marcus cleared his throat. With respect, Mr. Kane, we've done extensive market analysis. Our valuation is in line with comparable companies with different fundamentals. Victor pulled up a spreadsheet. Let me show you something. For the next 20 minutes, Victor systematically dismantled their Series C strategy. He pointed out flaws in their unit economics, questioned their customer acquisition costs, noted that 3 of their major clients were up for renewal in the next quarter, and losing even one would crater their projections. He wasn't aggressive about it. That was the worst part. He was calm, methodical, almost kind, like a surgeon explaining why the patient wouldn't survive the operation. So what are you suggesting? Ethan asked when Victor finally paused. I'm suggesting you lower your valuation ask to $300 million. It's more defensible, more likely to close without extensive due diligence that might uncover these same issues. And if we don't? Victor met his eyes. Then you risk a very public failure. Word gets around when a Series C falls through. Other investors get nervous. Employees start looking for exits. Customers reconsider their commitments. He paused. It becomes a spiral, and spirals are very difficult to recover from. Marcus was staring at his notes. Ethan could see him running the math, seeing the same thing Victor was showing them. We need to discuss this internally, Marcus said. Of course. Take your time. Victor stood, collecting his tablet. I'm not trying to derail your plans. I'm trying to help you succeed. Kane Investments has significant capital committed to CodeStream. Your success is our success. Then why does this feel like a threat? Ethan asked. Victor paused at the door. It's not a threat. It's reality. And the sooner you accept reality, the better positioned you'll be to work with it instead of against it. After he left, Marcus and Ethan sat in silence. He's right, Marcus said finally. About what? About everything. The valuation is aggressive. The burn rate is problematic. We've been so focused on growth that we haven't built sustainable unit economics. So what do? We lower the ask, we tighten the model, we extend our runway before we go back to market. Marcus looked tired. It's going to delay everything by at least 6 months. 6 months, half a year of momentum lost, half a year of watching their competitors pull ahead. This is because of Nora, Ethan said. Marcus frowned. What? Victor, coming here, picking apart our model. He's doing this because of her. That's paranoid. Is it? He shows up right after my wedding, right after I invited his wife, and suddenly he's concerned about our fundamentals? Fundamentals he hasn't cared about for 2 years? Or, Marcus said slowly, he's doing his job as an investor, and you're looking for personal motivations because you feel guilty about how things ended with Nora. I don't feel guilty. Then why have you been different since she showed up at your wedding? Ethan didn't answer. That night he went home to the Tribeca loft. Lillian was at a charity committee meeting, something about a gala in the spring, and poured himself a drink. Then another. Then a third. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Nora. Do you have a minute to talk? Ethan stared at the message for a full minute before responding. How did you get my number? I've always had it. Never deleted it. Can we talk? About what? About today. About Victor's meeting with you. Ethan's thumb hovered over the keyboard. He should say no. Should delete the message and pour another drink and pretend this wasn't happening. Instead, he typed, When? Tomorrow. Lunch. There's a place in Midtown. I'll send you the address. Why? Because I think you deserve to know what's actually happening. The address came through a moment later. Some restaurant Ethan had never heard of, probably expensive, probably the kind of place Nora could afford now that she'd married into money. He shouldn't go. He knew he shouldn't go. He sent back, Noon works. Then he sat in his empty apartment and tried to figure out what the hell he was doing. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't need a sign. You either knew it was there or you didn't belong. Ethan gave his name to the host, who led him to a table in the back where Nora was already waiting. She looked different in daylight. Less polished than at the wedding, more real. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup, wearing a simple black dress that probably still cost more than his first car. Thanks for coming, she said as he sat. Wasn't sure I would. But you did. The waiter appeared and they ordered without looking at the menus. Ethan got the feeling Nora ate here regularly, that this was her world now, places where servers knew your order and tables were always available. Victor told me about the meeting, Nora said once they were alone. Did he tell you he basically threatened to tank our Series C? He told me he gave you realistic feedback about your valuation. Same thing. It's not. Nora leaned forward slightly. Ethan, Victor isn't trying to hurt you. He's trying to prevent you from making a mistake that could destroy everything you've built. Funny way of showing it. Is it? Or are you just not used to someone telling you the truth? That stung more than it should have. Why did you want to meet? Ethan asked. Because I know you. And I know you're sitting there thinking Victor is doing this because of me. Because of us. Because you invited me to your wedding and now he's punishing you. Isn't he? No, he's doing his job. He ran the numbers, saw the problems, and gave you honest feedback. That's it. You really believe that? I know that because I helped him run the analysis. Ethan went very still. What? I'm part of Kane Investments now. Not officially. I don't have a title or anything. But Victor and I review major investments together. We're partners. In business and everything else. So you did know. About CodeStream. You've known the whole time. I found out about 6 months into our relationship, before we got engaged. Nora's voice was steady. And yes, I could have told Victor to divest. I could have made it weird, but I didn't. Because your company is a good investment, and I'm not petty enough to let personal history interfere with business decisions. How noble of you. It's not noble. It's professional. Something you might try. Their food arrived. Neither of them touched it. Why are you really here, Nora? She took a breath. Because I want you to understand something. What happened between us, it's done. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt. I'm just past it. But I think you're not. And I think that's going to be a problem. For who? For you. For your company. For your marriage. She paused. Victor wants to help CodeStream succeed. But he can't do that if you're going to fight him every step of the way because you see me when you look at him. That's not... It is. I can see it in your face right now. You're looking at me and you're seeing everything you walked away from. And it's making you question things you shouldn't be questioning. Ethan's throat felt tight. You don't know what I'm thinking. Don't I? I was married to you for 3 years. I know how you work. When you feel cornered, you lash out. When you feel guilty, you get defensive. And right now you feel both. I don't feel guilty. Liar. The word hung between them. Victor told me what he said to you at the wedding, Nora continued, about how I rebuilt my life, about what it cost. He shouldn't have done that. It wasn't his story to tell. Was it true? Does it matter? Yes. Nora looked away, out the window where Manhattan hustled past in its endless rush. Yes, it was true. After you left, I had nothing. I worked 3 jobs for 18 months just to stay afloat. I lived in a place with mice and no heat and neighbors who screamed at each other through the walls. I ate 1 meal a day and told myself it was intermittent fasting. Ethan felt something crack in his chest. But here's the thing, Nora said, turning back to him. I don't tell you this to make you feel bad. I tell you this because you need to know that I survived. I got through it. I built something real, and I did it without you. I can see that. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, you invited me to your wedding to prove you'd won. To show me everything I'd lost by not being good enough for your new life. But what you actually did was show me how far I'd come, how much better off I am without you. The words should have made him angry. Instead, they just made him tired. I made mistakes, he said quietly. Yes, you did. I should have, I don't know, handled things differently. Probably, but you can't change it now. None of us can. Nora's expression softened slightly. Look, I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here because Victor is going to keep pushing you on the Series C. And when he does, I need you to trust that it's not personal. It's business. Can you do that? Ethan wanted to say yes. Wanted to be professional and mature and all the things he claimed to be. But the truth was messier. I don't know, he said. Nora nodded like she'd expected that answer. Then figure it out. Because if you can't separate business from personal, you're going to lose everything. And this time, I won't be there to help you rebuild. She stood, leaving money on the table for her untouched meal. One more thing, she said. Lillian deserves better than whatever you're giving her. I hope you figure that out before she figures it out first. Then she left, and Ethan sat alone at the table, surrounded by food he couldn't eat and thoughts he couldn't escape. His phone buzzed. Lillian. Found a brownstone. Come see it tonight? He stared at the message, at the enthusiasm in it, at his wife trying to build a life with him while he sat in a restaurant mourning a past he'd chosen to leave. Send me the address. I'll meet you there. He paid the check and walked out into the afternoon sun, trying to remember when exactly he'd lost control of his own story. The brownstone was on a tree-lined street in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of block that looked like a movie set. Historic facades, iron railings, window boxes that probably cost more to maintain than most people's rent. Lillian was waiting on the steps when Ethan arrived, talking to a woman in a blazer who had to be the realtor. "You're late," Lillian said, but she was smiling. Actually smiling. "Come on, you have to see the kitchen." The house was beautiful in that specific way. Old Brooklyn money was beautiful. Original hardwood floors, crown molding, a fireplace in every room. The kitchen had been renovated sometime in the last decade. Marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, an island big enough to host a dinner party. "What do you think?" Lillian asked, watching his face. "It's incredible. The master bedroom has a walk-in closet that's bigger than our first apartment. Our current apartment or my first apartment?" She laughed. It was a good sound, one he hadn't heard in weeks. They toured the rest of the house while the realtor kept a respectful distance, letting them imagine their life in these rooms. Lillian pointed out where furniture would go, which room would be her office, where they'd put the piano she wanted to buy. She was animated in a way he hadn't seen since before the wedding, maybe before they got engaged. "There's a garden in back," the realtor said, opening the French doors off the dining room. "Completely private. Previous owners used it for entertaining." The garden was small but carefully maintained. Brick patio, climbing roses, a fountain that probably worked when someone remembered to turn it on. Lillian walked out into it, running her hand along the rose trellis. "We could have people over, dinner parties, maybe host a fundraiser for one of my committees." Ethan watched her from the doorway. She looked happy, really happy. The kind of happy he'd been hoping to give her when he proposed. "I'll give you two some privacy," the realtor said, disappearing back inside. Lillian turned to face him. "So? So what? What do you think? Should we make an offer?" The house was $4.2 million. They could afford it, technically. Between his salary and Lillian's trust fund and the equity he could pull from CodeStream, they could make the numbers work. But something in his chest was twisting. "It's a lot of money," he said. "It's an investment. Real estate in this neighborhood never depreciates." "I know, but with the Series C situation, the what situation?" He hadn't told her about Victor's meeting, about the problems with their valuation, the need to extend their runway, any of it. Nothing, just some complications with the funding round. Lillian's expression shifted. The happiness drained out like water from a broken glass. "What kind of complications?" "Kane Investments has concerns about our valuation. We might need to adjust our strategy." "And you're just mentioning this now?" "It only came up yesterday. Yesterday when you met with Victor Kane, your ex-wife's husband." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It was a business meeting." "Was it? Because from where I'm standing, everything involving that woman seems to complicate our life. That's not fair." "Isn't it? She shows up at our wedding. Her husband starts picking apart your company. You have secret lunch meetings with her." "How did you know about that?" "Your assistant mentioned it when I called your office. Said you were at lunch with someone named Nora." Lillian crossed her arms. "Were you planning to tell me?" "There was nothing to tell. She wanted to explain the Kane investment situation. That's all." "Right. Your ex-wife just casually wanted to explain why her husband is threatening your business. Totally normal." "He's not threatening the business. He's being cautious. And you believe that." "I don't know what I believe anymore." The words came out harder than he intended. Lillian flinched slightly. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. "It means everything is complicated right now. The company, the funding, Victor and Nora, all of it." "And us?" Ethan looked at her standing in the garden of a house she wanted them to buy, wearing an expression he couldn't quite read. "Us too, I guess." "I see." Lillian walked past him back into the house. "I'm going to tell the realtor we'll think about it." He followed her inside, but she was already at the front door, shaking the realtor's hand with practiced grace. "It's lovely," Lillian said. But we need a bit more time before making a decision. In the car back to the loft, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different than before. Heavier. More permanent. "I'm trying," Lillian said finally, staring out the window. "I'm really trying to make this work." "I know you are." "But you're not. You're going through the motions, but you're not actually here. You're somewhere else, with someone else." "That's not true." "Ethan." She turned to look at him. "I'm not stupid. I see the way you look when her name comes up, the way you've been different since the wedding. You invited her because you needed something from her, validation maybe, or closure. But whatever you got instead, it's eating you alive." He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she was seeing things that weren't there, but the words wouldn't come. "I think we should talk to someone," Lillian said. "A therapist, someone who can help us figure out what we're actually doing here. We've been married for a month." "Exactly, and we already can't have a conversation without it turning into a fight. That should tell you something." She was right. She was always right. That was the problem. When they got home, Lillian went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Ethan stood in the living room, looking at the view he'd worked so hard to afford, and felt nothing. His phone buzzed. "Marcus, need to talk. Can you come to the office?" "Now?" "Yeah. It's important." 20 minutes later, Ethan was back in the CodeStream conference room. Marcus was there with their CFO, Sarah Chen, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. Sarah opened her laptop. 3 of our major clients didn't renew their contracts. Ethan felt the floor shift under him. "Which 3? She listed them. Companies that represented nearly 30% of their revenue, companies whose contracts weren't supposed to be up for renewal for another quarter. They had early termination clauses, Sarah explained. 60 days notice. All 3 exercised them this week. Why? They're citing cost concerns, budget cuts, the usual reasons. That's bullshit, Ethan said. We're saving them money. Our platform reduces their workflow costs by 40%. I know, but here's the thing. Sarah pulled up an email chain. All 3 companies got outreach from the same competitor, Efficiency Core, offering the same services at half our price. Half our price isn't sustainable. They'll be out of business in a year. Maybe. But our clients don't care about a year from now. They care about their quarterly budgets. Marcus was very quiet, too quiet. What aren't you telling me? Ethan asked. Efficiency Core closed a Series B 3 weeks ago, Marcus said. $50 million. They're using it to undercut everyone in the market, grab market share, then raise prices later. Who funded them? Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. Just tell me, Ethan said. Ashford Holdings, Sarah said quietly. The name took a moment to register. Then it hit him like a truck. Ashford Holdings. Lillian's father's investment firm. You're telling me my father-in-law funded our competitor? He's one of several investors, Marcus said carefully. But yes, Ashford Holdings led the round. Ethan sat down hard. Does Lillian know? I have no idea, but it gets worse. How could it possibly get worse? Kane Investments also participated in the round. $5 million. The room spun slightly. Victor had invested in their competitor, while sitting on CodeStream's cap table, while being married to Nora. That's a conflict of interest, Ethan said. Technically, no. He's not on our board. He doesn't have any contractual obligation to avoid competitive investments. Marcus rubbed his face. But it's shady as hell. He did this on purpose. Him and Nora. They're trying to destroy us. Or, Sarah said, they're hedging their bets, investing in the market, not just one player. That's the generous interpretation, Marcus added. The less generous one is that they're actively working to devalue CodeStream so they can acquire it cheap in a few months when we're desperate. Ethan stood up, pacing. His mind was racing, trying to connect dots that kept moving. Victor's meeting, the concerns about valuation, the suggestion to lower their ask, extend their runway, all of it designed to keep them weak, vulnerable, unable to compete when Efficiency Core came in swinging. And Nora, her lunch meeting, her calm assurances that this was just business, her suggestion that he trust Victor. She'd been playing him the whole time. We need to respond, Ethan said. Counter their offer, match their pricing. We can't, Sarah said. Our unit economics don't support it. We'd be burning cash at an unsustainable rate. Then we raise emergency funding, bridge round, something to tide us over until we can close the Series C. Who's going to give us a bridge round when our major clients are leaving and our biggest investor just funded our competitor? Marcus was right. The optics were terrible. Any potential investor would see the same red flags they were seeing. There has to be something we can do, Ethan said. There is, Marcus said quietly. We can sell. The word hung in the air like poison. Sell to who? To whoever makes the best offer. Cut our losses. Get something for the shareholders. Move on. Absolutely not. I'm not selling the company I built. Ethan, we might not have a choice. If we lose more clients, if the Series C falls through, we'll be in a death spiral. Selling while we still have value is the smart move. The smart move is fighting. We have a good product, loyal customers. We can weather this. Can we? Or are you just too proud to admit defeat? The question hit harder than it should have. I need to think, Ethan said. Give me 24 hours. I'll figure something out. He left the office without waiting for a response. Outside, the city was doing its usual thing, moving, breathing, consuming. Ethan walked without direction, trying to process everything that had just imploded. Victor and Lillian's father. Working together, whether intentionally or not, to undermine everything he'd built. Nora somewhere in the middle, married to one of them, connected to both. He found himself at a bar he didn't recognize, ordered whiskey, then another. His phone rang, Lillian. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Finally, he answered. What? Where are you? Out? Ethan, we need to talk about your meeting. Sarah called me about Efficiency Corps. Did she tell you who funded them? Silence on the other end, long enough that Ethan knew she'd already known. You knew, he said. You knew your father invested in our competitor. He invests in a lot of companies. I don't track all of them. This isn't all of them. This is the company actively trying to destroy mine. He's not trying to destroy you. He's making sound investment decisions. Sound investment decisions that just happen to crater my business right when we're trying to raise money. Convenient. You're being paranoid. Am I? Or am I finally seeing what's actually happening here? What's that supposed to mean? Ethan laughed, and it came out bitter. It means everyone around me has an angle. Your father wants to prove I'm not good enough for his daughter. Victor wants to acquire my company cheap. Nora wants revenge for the divorce. And you, and me what? I don't know what you want. I'm not sure you know either. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Lillian, but fair stopped mattering about 3 weeks ago when I invited my ex-wife to our wedding and everything went to hell. He hung up before she could respond. 3 drinks later, his phone buzzed with a text. Not Lillian this time. Nora. We should talk. In person. Tonight if possible. He stared at the message. Every rational part of his brain said to ignore it, to go home to his wife, to deal with his actual life instead of chasing ghosts. But rational had stopped working for him. Where? She sent an address. A hotel bar in Midtown. Neutral ground. Ethan paid his tab and caught a cab. The bar was upscale, quiet. Nora was already there, sitting in a corner booth, nursing what looked like wine. She'd changed since lunch. Different dress, hair down. She looked tired. Thanks for coming, she said as he slid into the booth. I almost didn't. But you did. The bartender appeared. Ethan ordered another whiskey, even though he'd probably had enough. I heard about the client losses, Nora said. News travels fast. Victor told me. He wanted me to reach out. How considerate of him. Nora studied him for a long moment. You think we did this on purpose? Didn't you? No. We invested in Efficiency Corps 6 months ago, long before your wedding, long before any of this. You expect me to believe that's a coincidence? I expect you to believe it's business. We invest in sectors, Ethan, not personal vendettas. Right. Just like Victor's concerns about our valuation were purely professional. Just like everything that's happened since I sent you that invitation has been completely neutral and not at all connected. Nora set down her wine glass with deliberate care. You really think I'm that petty? That I'd spend the last 4 years building a life just to tear yours down? I don't know what to think anymore. Then let me make it simple. I don't care about you enough to destroy you. You're not that important to me. The words should have stung. Instead, they just made him angry. Then why are you here? Because Victor asked me to deliver a message. What message? Nora pulled out her phone, showed him an email. From Victor to the CodeStream Board of Directors, copied to Marcus and Sarah. Kane Investments proposes acquisition of CodeStream at current valuation. Full details attached. Ethan read it twice, 3 times. The numbers swam. He wants to buy the company, Ethan said. He wants to acquire it, yes, before Efficiency Core destroys the market, before you lose more clients, before the Series C falls apart completely. At current valuation, which is half of what we were asking for Series C, which is more than you'll get if you wait another month. You've lost 30% of revenue. Your burn rate is unsustainable. In 3 months, you'll be worth nothing. Ethan felt like he was watching himself from a distance again, seeing his life as a series of decisions that had led him here, to this moment, with his ex-wife offering him a buyout that would save his company but cost him everything else. What does Victor get out of this? A profitable acquisition. He'll merge CodeStream with 2 other companies in his portfolio, create a larger platform, then flip it in 18 months for triple the price. And me? You get to stay on as CTO, good salary, equity in the new venture, a soft landing instead of a hard crash. But no control. No control, Nora confirmed. Ethan's drink arrived. He downed half of it in one swallow. I need to think about it. You have until Monday. After that, Victor moves on to other opportunities, and you're on your own. That's 3 days. That's how long you have. Nora stood, gathering her purse. She looked down at him with something that might have been pity. For what it's worth, she said, I told Victor you wouldn't take the deal. I told him you'd rather crash and burn than admit you need help. But he wanted to make the offer anyway. Why? Because, unlike you, he doesn't let personal feelings interfere with sound business decisions. She paused at the edge of the booth. You built something good, Ethan. CodeStream actually helps people. It would be a shame to let your pride kill it. Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone with his whiskey and his choices. He sat there until the bartender started giving him looks. Then he paid and walked out into the night, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so far beyond his control. His phone had 6 missed calls from Lillian. He should call her back. Should go home. Should be the husband he'd promised to be. Instead, he found himself walking, block after block until his feet hurt and his head cleared slightly. He ended up at the old neighborhood, the part of Brooklyn where he and Nora had lived when they were married. The apartment building was still there, looking exactly as run down as he remembered. He stood across the street looking up at what had been their window. 3rd floor, corner unit. He could still remember the layout, the kitchen where they'd cook cheap meals, the living room with the door and filing cabinet table, the bedroom barely big enough for a mattress. They'd been so poor, so desperate, so convinced that if they just worked hard enough, everything would work out. And it had, just not the way he'd imagined. He'd gotten everything he thought he wanted, the company, the money, the marriage to someone who opened doors he couldn't have opened alone. And Nora had gotten everything too, the wealthy husband, the penthouse, the life of someone who'd never struggled. They'd both won, in their own ways. So why did it feel like they'd both lost something more important? His phone rang. Marcus. Where are you? Marcus asked. Lillian's worried. I'm fine. You don't sound fine. Did you meet with Nora? Yeah. And? Victor wants to buy the company. Marcus was quiet for a beat. What did you tell her? That I need to think about it. Ethan, listen to me. I know this isn't what you wanted, but it might be the best option we have. It's giving up. It's being smart. It's salvaging something instead of losing everything. I can't believe you're saying this. I'm saying this because I care about you, because I've watched you build CodeStream from nothing, and I don't want to watch you destroy it because you're too stubborn to accept help. Help from the people who put me in this position in the first place. They didn't put you here. Bad timing and aggressive competitors did. Victor's offering you a way out. He's offering himself a profitable acquisition. So what? You both win. That's how good business works. Ethan closed his eyes. I need to talk to Lillian. Yeah, you really do. She called me crying an hour ago, said you hung up on her. Guilt twisted in his stomach. I'll go home. Good. And Ethan, think about the offer. Really think about it. Don't let your pride make this decision. After Marcus hung up, Ethan stood on the sidewalk for another minute. Then he hailed a cab and gave the driver his address. Lillian was awake when he got home, sitting on the couch with her laptop. She looked up when he walked in, and he could see the tear tracks on her face. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. Are you drunk? A little. She closed her laptop. I talked to my father. Ethan's stomach dropped. And he said the efficiency core investment wasn't personal, that he didn't even realize it was your competitor until after the deal closed. Do you believe him? I don't know. Does it matter? It matters to me. Lillian stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. Do what? Compete with your past, with Nora, with whoever you think I should be. She was crying now, quiet tears that made her mascara run. I thought marrying you meant we'd be partners, that we'd build something together. But you don't want a partner. You want an accessory, someone who looks good and opens doors and doesn't ask you to actually be present. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day, my work, my anything? She laughed, but it came out broken. I have a whole life, Ethan. Committees and projects and things I care about, but you don't know about any of it because you've never asked. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd asked about her day. I'm sorry, he said. I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to be here. Actually here. Not half present while the other half of you chases whatever it is you think you lost. I don't know how. Then figure it out, because I can't keep being married to someone who isn't sure he wants to be married to me. She went to the bedroom and closed the door. Ethan stood in the living room, surrounded by furniture they'd bought together and a life they were supposed to be building, and felt more alone than he'd felt in years. His phone buzzed one more time. An email from Victor, subject line, offer details. Ethan opened it, read through the terms, the timeline, the contingencies. It was fair, more than fair actually. Victor was offering him a graceful exit from a situation that was about to become catastrophic. All Ethan had to do was admit he couldn't do it alone. He sat on the couch until the sun came up, trying to figure out which version of defeat he could live with. Morning came without Ethan having slept. He sat on the couch watching the city wake up through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Victor's offer still open on his laptop screen. The numbers hadn't changed, neither had his options. Lillian emerged from the bedroom around 7, already dressed. She looked at him, then at the laptop, then back at him. You've been up all night, she said. Couldn't sleep. She poured herself coffee, moving through the kitchen with the careful distance of someone navigating around a stranger. I'm going to my mother's for a few days. Ethan's chest tightened. Lillian, I need space to think, to figure out if this is what I actually want. And if it's not? She took a sip of coffee, looking at him over the rim. Then I guess we'll deal with that when I get there. She left without kissing him goodbye. Ethan heard the door close and felt something fundamental shift in the apartment, like a structure losing its support beams. His phone rang. Marcus. Board meeting in 2 hours, Marcus said. Everyone wants to discuss the Kane offer. I haven't decided yet. Well, you need to, because we just lost another client. Meridian Tech. That's 40% of our revenue gone in less than a week. Ethan closed his eyes. Jesus. Yeah, so whatever personal drama you're working through, work through it fast because we're out of time. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as Ethan expected. 6 faces on a video call, all of them looking varying degrees of concerned and annoyed. Harrison Ashcroft, Lillian's father, sat in the corner of his own frame, expression unreadable. Marcus presented the situation with clinical precision. Revenue losses, burn rate, runway projections. The math was simple and devastating. Kane's offer is the best option on the table, Marcus concluded. It preserves shareholder value and gives us an opportunity to be part of something larger. It also means giving up control, Ethan said. You already don't have control, one of the other board members, a woman named Jennifer Park, pointed out. The market has control. Your competitors have control. This offer at least gives you a seat at the table. As CTO, not CEO. As someone employed instead of unemployed, Jennifer said. Pick your battles, Ethan. Harrison Ashcroft finally spoke. I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Everyone went quiet. My firm invested in Efficiency Core, Harrison continued. Ethan believes this was done maliciously, to undermine CodeStream. I want to state for the record that it wasn't. We invest in sectors, not personal agendas. The fact that my son-in-law happens to compete in that sector is unfortunate timing, nothing more. Unfortunate timing, Ethan repeated. That's one way to put it. Please, would you prefer I lie and say I did it to hurt you? Because I didn't. I barely think about you, Ethan. Your company is a line item in a portfolio of 80 investments. You're not that special. The words were delivered without malice. Somehow that made them worse. The question, Harrison continued, is whether you're going to let pride destroy what you've built, or whether you're going to make the smart decision. And what's the smart decision? Taking the Kane offer, moving on, learning that sometimes success means knowing when to fold. Ethan wanted to argue. To tell Harrison he didn't understand, that CodeStream was more than just a line item, that it represented years of sacrifice and work. But everyone in that meeting knew the same thing he knew. The company was dying, and he could either let it die slowly and painfully, or he could sell it while it still had value. I need to make a call, Ethan said. Give me an hour. He ended the meeting before anyone could object. Then he sat in the empty conference room and stared at his phone. He could call Victor, accept the offer, move forward with some semblance of dignity and tact, or he could call the one person who actually understood what this company meant to him. He dialed before he could talk himself out of it. Nora answered on the second ring. Ethan? I need to ask you something. Okay. Did you know about Efficiency Core, about the timing, about any of it? Did you and Victor plan this? Silence on the other end, long enough that Ethan thought she might hang up. No, she said finally. We didn't plan it, but we knew about the investment, and we knew what it would do to CodeStream. And you didn't tell me. Why would I? We're not friends, Ethan. We're not anything. You made sure of that 4 years ago. So this is revenge. No, this is business. And if you can't see the difference, that's your problem, not mine. Ethan laughed, and it came out harsh. You really don't care, do you? About me? About what we had? Any of it. I cared for 3 years while we were married. I cared while I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I cared when you left me with $700 and a suitcase full of secondhand clothes. Her voice stayed level. I stopped caring when I realized you never cared about me, just about what I represented. The struggling artist wife who proved you were still humble, still one of the good ones. That's not... It is. You needed me to stay small so you could feel big. And when I couldn't be small anymore, when the reality of our life became embarrassing instead of romantic, you left. She paused. So no, Ethan, I don't care. I moved on. I built something real. Something that doesn't require me to make myself smaller. With Victor. With Victor, who sees me as an equal, who asks my opinion on investments and actually listens, who doesn't need me to be anything except myself. Ethan felt something crack in his chest. I never asked you to be small. You didn't have to ask. You just made it clear that's what you needed, and I was young enough and desperate enough to try. Her voice softened slightly. But I'm not that person anymore. And you need to stop expecting me to be. I wasn't. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Then figure it out. But don't drag me into it. I have my own life now, and it doesn't include cleaning up your messes. She hung up. Ethan sat with the dead phone in his hand, staring at the conference table where he'd made so many decisions that had led him here. He thought about Nora in that coffee shop, signing divorce papers with hands that didn't shake. Thought about her at the wedding, calm and untouchable beside Victor. Thought about her yesterday, delivering an acquisition offer with the detachment of someone discussing the weather. She'd meant what she said. She really didn't care. And that hurt more than any revenge could have. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Hour's up. What's the call? Ethan stood, straightening his tie. He walked back into his office, opened his laptop, and typed out an email to Victor Kane. I accept your offer. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss terms. He hit send before he could change his mind. Then he called Marcus. Set up the meeting with Kane. We're taking the deal. You're sure? No, but I'm out of better options. The meeting happened 3 days later. Victor's office occupied the top floor of a building in Midtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of view that reminded you exactly how high up you'd climbed. Ethan arrived with Marcus and Sarah. Victor was already there with 2 lawyers and a woman Ethan didn't recognize. Not Nora, thankfully. He wasn't sure he could handle seeing her in this context. Ethan. Victor shook his hand with the same calm grip from the wedding. Thank you for coming. They sat around a conference table that probably cost more than Ethan's first car. The lawyers went through the terms with excruciating detail. Acquisition price, payment structure, Ethan's role going forward, non-compete clauses, everything neat and legal and binding. Through it all, Victor remained pleasant, professional. He asked smart questions, made reasonable counteroffers, treated Ethan like a valued partner instead of someone he was dismantling. It made Ethan hate him a little less, which somehow made everything worse. One thing I want to clarify, Victor said when the lawyers finally paused. Your role as CTO. I'm not offering it because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because you're good at what you do. CodeStream has real value. I want that value preserved in the larger platform we're building. Appreciated, Ethan said, trying to mean it. However, I need to know you're actually committed, that you're not going to spend the next year resenting the situation and poisoning the culture. I'll be professional. That's not what I asked. Ethan met Victor's eyes. The older man's expression was neutral, but there was something in it. Not quite sympathy, more like recognition. I'll be committed, Ethan said. This company means something to me. I want to see it succeed, even if I'm not the one running it. Victor nodded. Good. Then we have a deal. They shook hands. Papers were signed. The lawyers gathered their copies and filed out. Within an hour, it was done. CodeStream no longer belonged to Ethan Cole. Outside, Marcus walked with him to the elevator. You okay? I don't know what I am. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. Did I? Or did I just take the least painful way out? Maybe both. Maybe that's what growing up looks like. The elevator arrived. Marcus got in, but Ethan hesitated. I'm going to walk for a bit, he said. You sure? Yeah, I need to clear my head. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. Call me if you need anything. The elevator doors closed and Ethan was alone in the hallway. He stood there for a moment, then turned and walked back toward Victor's office. The receptionist looked surprised to see him. Is Victor still here? Ethan asked. I think so. Let me check. A minute later, she nodded him through. Victor was standing by the window, phone to his ear. He held up one finger, finished his conversation, then turned. Forget something? He asked. I need to know something, Ethan said. Did you do this because of Nora? Victor's expression didn't change. Do what? All of it. The investment in Efficiency Core, the concerns about our valuation, the acquisition offer. Was any of it because I invited her to my wedding? Would it matter if it was? Yes. Victor walked to his desk, poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher, handed one to Ethan. I invested in Efficiency Core because it's a good company with solid fundamentals. I raised concerns about your valuation because they were legitimate concerns. And I made the acquisition offer because CodeStream is worth acquiring. That's not an answer, and it's the only answer you're going to get. Victor took a sip of water. But since we're being honest, I'll tell you this. When Nora told me about the wedding invitation, my first instinct was to destroy you, to make you understand what it felt like to have everything taken away. Ethan's throat tightened. But Nora talked me out of it, Victor continued. She said you weren't worth the energy, that the best revenge was no revenge at all, just living well and letting you spiral on your own. He set down his glass. So no, I didn't do this because of her. I did it despite her. Because she was right. You're not worth the energy. The words should have stung. Instead, they just felt true. She's better off without me, Ethan said quietly, significantly. And you're good to her. Good for her. I try to be. Ethan nodded. Thank you for the offer, for being professional about this, for not making it personal even though it probably should have been. It's just business, Ethan. The sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ethan extended his hand. I'll see you Monday. To start the transition. Victor shook it. Looking forward to it. Ethan left the office and took the elevator down 43 floors, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. He went home to the empty loft. Lillian still hadn't come back. He called her, got voicemail, left a message explaining what had happened, that he'd sold the company, that he was sorry, that he understood if she needed more time. Then he sat on the couch and tried to figure out who he was without CodeStream defining him. 2 days later, Lillian came home. She walked in around noon carrying a small overnight bag. Ethan was at the dining table working through transition documents. He looked up when he heard the door. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She set down her bag. "I heard about the sale." "Yeah, it happened fast. Are you okay?" "I don't know. Ask me in a month." Lillian sat down across from him. She looked tired, or maybe just done. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about what I want. And I think we should separate, officially, get some real distance. Figure out if this marriage is something we both actually want, or if we just got caught up in what we thought we should want." Ethan had known it was coming, had felt it building since the wedding, maybe even before. But hearing her say it still hurt. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "What else is there to say? You're right, we rushed into this. We got married for the wrong reasons, and now we're both miserable." Lillian's eyes were wet. "I'm not miserable because of you. I'm miserable because you're not here. You're physically present, but you're somewhere else. Always somewhere else." "I know." "Do you? Because I've spent 6 months trying to build a life with someone who is still living in his past, still trying to prove something to a woman who doesn't care anymore." "It wasn't about proving anything to Nora." "Then what was it about?" Ethan sat back, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "It was about proving I made the right choice, that leaving her was necessary, that I couldn't have become successful if I'd stayed. And did you prove it? No, I proved the opposite. I proved that success without anything real underneath it is just emptiness with better furniture." Lillian reached across the table, took his hand. "I don't hate you, Ethan. I just can't be married to someone who doesn't know why he married me. I married you because you were everything I thought I wanted, but not what you actually needed." "No," he admitted. "Probably not." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands across the table like people saying goodbye. "The brownstone," Lillian said finally. "They're willing to negotiate on price if we're still interested." "Are we?" "I don't think so. Not anymore." She squeezed his hand once, then let go, started packing her things. Ethan helped, and they worked in quiet coordination, dividing a life they'd barely had time to build. When she left, she kissed his cheek. "I hope you figure out what you're looking for." "You too." "I already know what I'm looking for. Someone who's sure they want to be with me. Not someone who's just running from something else." The door closed behind her, and Ethan stood in the loft that suddenly felt too big and too empty, and too much like a museum of choices he couldn't take back. 6 months went by like water. The transition to Kane Investments ownership was smoother than Ethan expected. Victor kept his word, treated him as a valued CTO, listened to his input, made space for his expertise. The combined platform was actually good, better than CodeStream alone. More robust, more scalable, more sustainable. Ethan found himself enjoying the work again. Without the pressure of fundraising and board meetings and constant existential dread, he could focus on the actual product, on building things that solved problems. He and Lillian finalized their divorce quietly. No drama, no fighting, just two people acknowledging they'd made a mistake and choosing to correct it with as much grace as possible. She sent him a Christmas card. He sent one back. He moved out of the Tribeca loft and into a smaller place in the West Village, something that felt more like a home and less like a showroom. And slowly, gradually, he started to understand what Nora had tried to tell him. Success without connection was just a different kind of poverty. He started having dinner with Marcus once a week, actually talking, not just discussing business. Started calling his mom more often. Started saying yes to invitations from coworkers, building friendships that weren't based on networking value. Started living a life that looked smaller on paper but felt bigger in practice. One evening in late spring, he ran into Nora at a coffee shop in Soho. She was alone, reading a book, drinking something that wasn't coffee. He almost walked past without saying anything, then changed his mind. "Hi," he said, stopping at her table. She looked up, surprised. "Ethan, hi. Mind if I sit for a second?" She gestured to the empty chair. "Go ahead." He sat, suddenly nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For being honest with me, about everything, about who I was and what I was doing and why it was never going to work." Nora closed her book. "That's a heavy thank you for a random Tuesday. I've been thinking about it. About our conversation after the wedding. About what you said about me needing you to be small." He paused. "You were right." "I know I was right, but it's nice to hear you admit it. I'm trying to be better, to be someone who doesn't need people to be less so I can be more." "How's that going?" "Slowly, but I think I'm getting there." Nora studied him for a moment. "You look different." "Different how?" "Less desperate. Less like you're trying to prove something every second of every day." "Selling the company helped with that." "I heard. Victor says you're doing good work." "He's a good boss, better than I was." "That's not exactly a high bar." Ethan laughed. It felt good, natural. "Fair point." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, the city moved past the windows in its endless rush. Inside, two people who'd once promised forever to each other sat across a small table and found they had nothing left to fight about. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, "for how I ended things, for leaving you with nothing, for making it seem like you were the problem when really it was me the whole time. I know you are, and I appreciate hearing it, but I don't need it anymore. I know. That's why I'm saying it. Not because you need to hear it, because I need to say it." Nora's expression softened slightly. "You really are different. I'm trying to be." "Good. Keep trying." She stood, gathering her book and her bag. "I should go. Victor's making dinner and he gets annoyed when I'm late." "Tell him I said hi." "I won't. That would be weird. Also fair." She paused at the edge of the table. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're figuring it out. I never wanted you to fail, Ethan. I just wanted you to see me, to see that I was a person, not an accessory or an obstacle. I see it now. Too late. But I see it. Better late than never, I guess." She left, and Ethan sat with his coffee, watching her disappear into the crowd. He didn't feel the desperate pull he'd felt at the wedding. Didn't feel the need to chase her, or convince her, or prove anything. He just felt grateful she'd existed in his life, even if he'd been too stupid to appreciate it when it mattered. A year after selling CodeStream, Victor called him into his office. "We're taking the combined platform public," Victor said. 18 months ahead of schedule. The market's strong, the numbers are solid, and we have interest from some major players." "That's great," Ethan said. "It is. And I want you to know that your equity stake is going to be worth considerably more than what you got in the acquisition." Ethan did the math in his head. It was a lot. More than he'd lost when he sold. More than he'd probably have gotten if he'd tried to limp through on his own. "Thank you," he said, "for taking a chance on this. On me. You made it easy. You're good at what you do when you're not sabotaging yourself." "I'm working on that." Victor leaned back in his chair. "I'm also offering you a choice. You can stay on as CTO. Or you can take your equity, cash out when we go public, and start something new. No hard feelings either way." Ethan hadn't expected that. "You'd be okay with me leaving?" "I'd prefer you stay. You're valuable. But I've learned that trying to keep people who don't want to be kept never ends well." "Did Nora tell you to say that?" Victor smiled slightly. "Maybe, but it's still true." Ethan thought about it. About staying in a comfortable role with a guaranteed paycheck. About starting over, building something new, taking another risk. "Can I think about it?" "Take your time. The IPO isn't for another 6 months." That night, Ethan sat in his West Village apartment and made a list. Pros and cons. Risk versus security. All the logical considerations that should have made the decision obvious. Then he threw the list away and asked himself what he actually wanted. The answer surprised him. He wanted to build something again. But this time, he wanted to build it with people he trusted, people he valued, people who saw him as more than just a means to an end. He called Marcus. "Want to start a company?" Marcus laughed. Are you serious? Completely. I've been thinking about a problem we never solved at CodeStream, around data privacy and user control. I think there's something there. And you want to do this together. I want to do it right, with a real partner, someone I trust. What about funding? I'll have money from the IPO, enough to bootstrap for a while. And if we need more, we'll find investors who actually care about what we're building. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You know this is crazy, right? You finally have stability, a good job, no stress. I know, but I don't want stability. I want to build something that matters, and I want to do it with people who matter to me. When do we start? They started 3 months later, working out of a shared office space in Brooklyn. No fancy loft, no expensive furniture, just 2 desks, 2 laptops, and a whiteboard covered in terrible ideas that occasionally sparked good ones. It felt like starting over, like being back at the beginning, before everything got complicated and hollow. But this time, Ethan knew the difference between building something and building an image. This time, he wasn't running from anything. He was running toward something real. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, that felt like enough. 5 years after the wedding, Ethan saw Nora one more time. It was at a tech conference in San Francisco. He was on a panel about startup culture. She was in the audience with Victor, both of them attending as investors. After the panel, they ended up at the same reception. Ethan was talking to a potential hire when he saw her across the room. She looked the same, maybe a little older, laugh lines deeper, but still that same calm presence. He excused himself and walked over. Nora. She turned, smiled. Ethan, good panel. You've gotten better at public speaking. Practice. Lots of practice. Victor appeared with 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Nora. Ethan, heard good things about your new venture. Thanks. It's been a learning process. The best things usually are? They made small talk for a few minutes. Easy, professional, the kind of conversation strangers might have if they happen to work in similar fields. Then Victor got pulled into another conversation, and Ethan and Nora were alone. You seem happy, she said. I am, mostly. You? Very. Good. You deserve that. So do you. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the reception flow around them. I never thanked you properly, Ethan said, for being honest with me, for not letting me get away with my bullshit. You thanked me at that coffee shop. I know, but I don't think I really understood it then. What you were trying to tell me. He paused. I get it now. That success isn't about what you have or who you're with or what your valuation is. It's about whether you can look at yourself and recognize the person looking back. And can you? Most days, some days better than others. Nora smiled. That's all any of us can hope for. Victor reappeared, touched Nora's elbow. Ready to head out? Yeah. She turned back to Ethan. Take care of yourself. You too. He watched them leave, her hand tucked into Victor's arm, moving through the crowd with the easy confidence of people who knew exactly where they belonged. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel the pull of what might have been. He just felt grateful for what was. He found Marcus at the bar. Ready to get out of here? Thought you'd never ask. They left the reception and walked out into the San Francisco night. The city spread out around them, full of people chasing dreams and building empires, and learning the same lessons Ethan had learned too slowly. You think we'll make it this time? Marcus asked. Make it how? Build something that lasts, that matters. Ethan thought about CodeStream, about the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt, the success that had felt hollow because he'd built it on the wrong foundation. Then he thought about his new company. Small, scrappy, uncertain, built with someone he trusted, focused on solving real problems, grounded in something more substantial than ego. I don't know if we'll make it, he said honestly, but I know we're building it the right way, with the right people, for the right reasons, and if we fail, at least we'll fail trying to do something good. That's very mature of you. I'm working on it. They found a bar that wasn't trying too hard, ordered drinks, talked about the product, the team, the challenges ahead, made plans and argued about features and laughed at stupid jokes. And somewhere in the middle of that ordinary night, Ethan realized he'd finally found what he'd been looking for all along. Not success that looked impressive from the outside, but a life that felt real from the inside. a life built on connection instead of conquest, a life where the people around him mattered more than the image he projected. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined when he'd sent that wedding invitation to Nora, when he'd stood at the altar next to Lillian, convinced he'd won. But it was better, because it was true. And truth, he'd finally learned, was worth more than all the hollow victories in the world.